When I used to send my children handmade cards every holiday, I thought they'd honor what I built. Last Christmas, I got a group text. No gifts this year. We're simplifying. So I donated their childhood toys to an orphanage and spent Christmas there. It was the warmest holiday I've felt in years. My name is Ilara, and for as long as I can remember, the rhythm of the year was marked by the careful creation of handmade cards. Birthdays, Easter, and especially Christmas, each occasion, was an opportunity to pour a little piece of my heart onto paper. I'd spend hours choosing the right cardstock, sketching designs, carefully lettering messages. When my children, my eldest, Leo, my thoughtful Clara, and my youngest, Ben, were small, they'd often sit beside me, their own clumsy attempts with glitter and glue a joyful accompaniment. After my husband Thomas passed, these little traditions became even more precious, threads connecting me to them, to our shared past. Living here in Beni Mellal, with the children grown and scattered across different continents, these gestures felt all the more significant. Sometimes I'd incorporate a little local touch, a pressed wildflower from the foothills of the Atlas Mountains, a tiny motif inspired by Amazigh embroidery. It was my way of bridging the miles, of sending not just a card, but a tangible piece of my love. Last year, as the Moroccan sun began to take on the milder slant of late autumn, I was already sketching designs for my Christmas cards. I imagined Leo's smile, Clara's appreciative nod, Ben's amused chuckle. I'd even started gathering small, thoughtful trinkets from the local souk, items I knew each of them would appreciate in their own way. The air was getting cooler, and even though Christmas isn't a grand public affair here, I always recreated its warmth within my own walls, a tradition Thomas and I had carried with us. Then, my phone buzzed. A group text from Leo, but clearly a coordinated message from all three. My heart did a little flip of anticipation. Perhaps they were planning a surprise visit. I opened it. The words were stark, impersonal, a cold little arrow. "Hi, Mom. Quick heads up from all of us. We've decided to really simplify Christmas this year. No gifts, no cards, just focusing on experiences and less stuff. Hope you understand. Love, L, C, and B." I read it twice, then a third time. Simplifying. The word felt like a polite dismissal. My carefully chosen papers, my sketched designs, the little trinkets I'd lovingly selected, all rendered meaningless by a short, efficient text message. No individual call, no gentle explanation. Just a blanket decree from the Committee of Simplifying Children. A wave of something, cold and hollow, washed over me. It wasn't about the gifts themselves. I'd long outgrown the need for material things. It was about the gesture, the connection, the shared tradition that they had so easily, so collectively discarded. It felt as though they were simplifying me out of their holiday, out of a significant part of what bound us. I walked through my small riad, the vibrant colors of the zellige tiles suddenly feeling muted. The half-finished cards on my desk looked forlorn, like unanswered letters. The joy I'd felt in their creation curdled into a quiet ache. Were my efforts, my little expressions of love, just more stuff to them? More clutter in their already full and apparently overly complicated lives? That evening, unable to settle, I found myself drawn to the old wooden chest in the spare room. Inside, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, were their childhood treasures. Leo's collection of painted stones, Clara's tattered velvet rabbit with one button eye, Ben's box of intricately built Lego spaceships. Toys they had adored. Toys. That had been the center of their small worlds. Toys that held the echoes of their laughter, their tears, their dreams. I had saved them all, imagining that one day, perhaps, they would want to show them to their own children. Holding Clara's little rabbit, its fur worn smooth by years of hugs, the contrast between the depth of feeling these objects represented and the sterile brevity of that group text was almost unbearable. They were simplifying. Perhaps it was time I did some simplifying too. But my simplification wouldn't be about erasing connections. It would be about redirecting them. If the love and care embodied in these toys, in my handmade cards, were no longer valued by my own children, then perhaps they would be by others. The next morning, I made a few calls. There was a small children's center on the outskirts of Beni Mellal, a place that cared for little ones who had very little. I'd driven past it many times. I explained, haltingly, that I had some well-loved toys and was wondering if they might be of use. The woman's voice on the other end was warm, grateful. A new purpose began to take root, pushing aside some of the hurt. I wouldn't be spending the next few weeks meticulously crafting cards that weren't wanted. Instead, I would carefully sort through this chest of memories. Each toy, each book, each little piece of their past would be cleaned, mended if necessary, and prepared for a new life, a new child to cherish it. My Christmas wouldn't be about what I wasn't receiving from my children. It would be about what I could still give. The weeks that followed were a bittersweet pilgrimage through the landscape of my children's past. Each toy I lifted from the old wooden chest in my riad here in Beni Malal was a conversation with a ghost. Leo's meticulously painted miniature. Soldiers, each one a hero in some forgotten boyhood battle. Clara's well-loved storybooks, their spines softened by countless readings, pages still holding the faint scent of her childhood perfume. Ben's elaborate constructions of interlocking blocks, monuments to an imagination that once knew no bounds. I dusted them, mended a loose wheel here, a frayed ribbon there. It wasn't just about cleaning toys, it was about honoring memories, even as I prepared to release them. The director of the local children's center, a kind, energetic woman named Fatima, had been genuinely touched when I'd called. "Ah, Madame Ilara," she'd said, her French accented with warm Darija. "Gifts are always welcome, but gifts from the heart, gifts with stories, those are special." On a bright December morning, a few days before Christmas, I hired a small cart to transport the carefully packed boxes. The center, Dar al-Amal, the House of Hope, was a modest, whitewashed building on a bustling street, its courtyard filled. With the cheerful sounds of children, Fatima greeted me with a wide smile and ushered me in. The children, ranging in age from toddlers to preteens, gathered around with wide, curious eyes as I began to unpack. There was no mad scramble, just a palpable sense of anticipation. When I placed Leo's box of soldiers on a mat, a small boy with serious eyes reached out a tentative hand. I showed him how they stood, how they marched. Soon, a quiet battle was unfolding, his hushed commands filling the air. Clara's tattered rabbit was gently lifted by a little girl who immediately cradled it to her cheek, murmuring softly. Ben's box of blocks became the center of an intense construction project, a tower of improbable height rising under several small, determined hands. Their joy was pure, uncomplicated. There were no calculations of value, no thoughts of simplifying. A discarded toy, once relegated to an attic, became a treasure. I spent the morning there, showing them how things worked, telling them small, imagined stories about where the toys had come from, not about my children, but about brave knights and adventurous rabbits. Laughter filled the courtyard, a sound more beautiful than any carol. As I was preparing to leave, feeling a lightness I hadn't experienced in months, Fatima touched my arm. "Madame Ilara," she said, "the children, they have taken to you. We are having a small celebration in a few days, for the end of the year. Simple food, some songs. Perhaps you would join us? It would mean a lot to them, to us." Her invitation was like a warm hand reaching out in the cold. My own Christmas Eve I knew would be silent, the group text from my children a stark reminder of their absence, their simplified affections. "I would be honored, Fatima," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. And so, on Christmas Eve, a day I had always spent in a flurry of last-minute preparations for my own family, I found myself back at Dar al-Amal. The children had drawn pictures, now taped to the walls, bright, cheerful depictions of flowers, animals, and smiling suns. There was a large pot of tagine simmering in the small kitchen, its fragrant steam a promise of shared sustenance. Didn't have grand gifts for them, only my presents, and a few bags of oranges and dates I'd bought in the souk. But it didn't matter. I helped serve the food. I listened as they sang songs in Arabic and French, their voices clear and sweet. A little girl with braids, the one who had adopted Clara's rabbit, shyly offered me a piece of her bread. Another, the boy with Leo's soldiers, presented me with a carefully drawn picture of a very lopsided flower. There were no glittering trees, no piles of expensive presents, no complicated family dynamics to navigate. There was just warmth. The genuine, uncomplicated warmth of human connection. We ate together, laughed together. Later, as some of the younger children grew sleepy, I sat with them, humming old lullabies Thomas used to sing to ours. One little boy, his eyes heavy, leaned his head against my arm and drifted off to sleep. Holding him, surrounded by the soft sounds of the center, I felt a profound peace settle over me. This wasn't the Christmas I had envisioned months ago, the one filled with my own family and familiar traditions. But it was, without a doubt, the warmest, most meaningful holiday I had felt in years. The ache from my children's text was still there, a dull throb in a distant part of my heart. But it was overshadowed by the immediate, palpable joy of being needed, of being present, of sharing a simple human kindness that asked for nothing. In return, here, in this unassuming house of hope in Beni Mellal, I had found a measure of my own. The warmth of that Christmas Eve at Dar al-Amal lingered long after the last child had drifted off to sleep and the scent of tagine had faded from the air. It wasn't just a fleeting moment of joy, it felt like a gentle realignment of my spirit. In the weeks that followed, I found myself drawn back to the Children's Center in Beni Mellal. Fatima, the director, welcomed me with open arms. I started volunteering regularly, initially just for a few hours a week, then more. I helped the older children with their French homework, my own a little rusty but serviceable. I read stories to the younger ones, my voice finding a new confidence as their small faces looked up at me, rapt. I even taught a few of the more enterprising girls some basic embroidery stitches, using a needle and thread to create small, colorful patterns on scraps of fabric, much like I used to do for my own cards. The house, my little riad, no longer felt so cavernously empty. It was still quiet, but now it was a peaceful quiet, a place to rest and recharge before returning to the vibrant, sometimes chaotic energy of the center. The ache from my children's impersonal Christmas text hadn't vanished entirely, but it had receded, overshadowed by the genuine affection and appreciation I found at Dar al-Amal. My own children, Leo, Clara, and Ben, had, as a group, sent a brief Happy Holidays Mom text on Christmas Day itself. I'd replied with a simple, "and to you all." I didn't mention where I was or what I was doing. They wanted simplicity, and I was, in my own way, granting it to them by not burdening them with the details of a Christmas they had opted out of. Several months passed. Spring arrived in Beni Mellal, painting the foothills with wildflowers. It was Clara who first broke the comfortable, if somewhat distant, silence. She called, announcing she had a work conference in Marrakech and was thinking of extending her trip by a couple of days to visit me. A flicker of the old anticipation stirred within me, quickly followed by a calm acceptance. Clara arrived looking tired, but trying to be cheerful. We walked through the souk, sipped mint tea, and talked mostly about her work, her children. Then, one afternoon, as we were sitting in my courtyard, she looked around. "It's funny, Mom," she said. "I was just thinking about that old rocking horse, the wooden one Dad made. Remember how Leo nearly broke his arm on it? I was telling my Sophia about it the other day. Is it still up in the attic here?" I met her gaze calmly. "No, dear," I said. "It isn't?" "Oh," she said, a little surprised. "Did you get rid of some things? We always said we should help you clear out the attic one of these years." "I did do some clearing out," I confirmed. "Just before Christmas, actually. I gathered up all your old childhood toys. The rocking horse, Leo's soldiers, Ben's blocks, your storybooks, the rabbit." Clara's eyes widened slightly. "All of them? What did you do with them?" "I donated them," I said, my voice gentle but firm, "to Dar al-Amal, the local children's center where I volunteer. The children there have very little." They were overjoyed. "Your rabbit, Clara, found a very good home with a little girl who treasures her." The color drained a little from Clara's face. She was silent for a long moment, her teacup halfway to her lips. You gave them away?" she finally whispered. "All of them? Without asking us?" "You and your brothers made it clear you were simplifying," I reminded her softly. "You didn't want any stuff. Those toys were just stuff gathering dust. Representing a past you seemed keen to move on from, I decided they would be better appreciated by children who would actually play with them, who would create new memories with them." Clara put her cup down, her hand trembling slightly. "But, Mom, those were our memories, our childhood. I always thought one day I'd show them to Sophia and Daniel Jr. Assumptions can be misleading, can't they?" I said, still quietly. much like a group text about simplifying holidays can be. I acted on the message I received. The toys brought immense joy where they went, Clara. Far more, I suspect, than they would have sitting in boxes for another 20 years. She looked away, tears welling in her eyes. We didn't mean for you to feel like we didn't care about those things, or about your efforts. Perhaps not, I conceded, but messages, however they are intended, have consequences. Later, that evening, I knew Claire had called Leo and Ben. Their reactions, when they each called me over the next couple of days, were varied. Leo was defensive, trying to justify their simplifying as a modern, minimalist approach, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. Ben was more subdued, genuinely regretful. Wow, Mom, I guess I never really thought about it like that. That old train set? I really loved that train set. There were no outright apologies, not yet. But there was a new, unsettled awareness. In their voices, their simplification had simplified things for me too. It had simplified my attachment to objects they no longer valued, and it had simplified my need for their validation of my holiday traditions. My world, here in Beni Mellal, had expanded to include a new kind of family at Dar al-Amal, one that cherished small kindnesses and the warmth of a shared moment. The toys were gone, but in their place, something new and unexpectedly resilient was beginning to grow within me. The calls from my children in the months that followed Claire's visit were different. The initial defensiveness from Leo softened into a somewhat awkward curiosity about my life in Beni Mellal. Ben, my youngest, expressed a quiet, almost sheepish, interest in the children at Dar al-Amal. Clara, however, was the most changed. Her conversations became longer, more thoughtful. She'd ask about specific children Fatima, the director, had mentioned, about the little projects I was doing with them. The elephant in the room, their simplified Christmas and the subsequent donation of their toys, wasn't directly addressed again for a while, but its presence was palpable, a silent undercurrent in our exchanges. My life, meanwhile, had found a new, gentle rhythm. My days were anchored by my time at the Children's Center. I helped Fatima with paperwork, taught a small group of older girls to sew simple garments, and discovered an unexpected talent for coaxing smiles from even the shyest toddlers with silly songs and hand puppets. The children of Dar al-Amal became my daily dose of joy, their resilience and affection a constant source of warmth. They didn't know about my other life, my grown children, the traditions I'd cherished. They simply knew me as Alara, the lady who brought oranges and always had a story or a listening ear. Here, I was not a mother whose efforts were being simplified. I was simply valued. As the next holiday season approached, a year after the text message, I felt none of the old anxieties. I was planning a small party for the children at Dar al-Amal, helping Fatima source ingredients for special holiday treats, and stitching little felt animals as small gifts. My heart was full, not with the anticipation of family traditions, but with the joy of contributing to this new community I had found. It was Clara who called first, about a month before Christmas. "Mom," she said, her voice hesitant, "we were talking, Leo, Ben, and I, about Christmas this year." I waited, my needle poised over a half-finished felt lion. "We were wondering," she continued, if you'd like us to come, to you, to Beni Mellal, all of us. The grandkids, too. We could rent a larger riad if yours is too small. We want to be with you." It was, I realized, the closest to an apology I might ever get from them as a collective. It was an admission, unspoken but clear, that their previous attempt at simplifying had perhaps oversimplified things to the point of severing something important. "That's a very thoughtful offer, Clara," I said, and it was, but a part of me, the part that had found such unexpected peace at Dar al-Amal, hesitated. "We also wanted to say," she rushed on, as if afraid I might refuse, "that we understand if you have other plans. We know we messed up last year. We didn't think about what those traditions, your cards, the toys, what they really meant to you. And as it turns out, to us too, even if we didn't realize it at the time." There it was. Not a full apology, perhaps, but an acknowledgement. And for me, that was enough. "I do have some commitments here with the children at Dar al-Amal," I told her honestly. "They've become very important to me." "We could help," Ben piped up. He must have been on speakerphone. We could bring gifts for the kids there, real ones, not just old toys. His voice was earnest. And so, they came. My 3 children, and their families descended upon Beni Malal. It was chaotic, noisy, and occasionally overwhelming, but it was different. They didn't just visit my riad. They came with me to Dar al-Amal. They watched, a little awkwardly at first, as I interacted with the children, as little hands slipped into mine, as small faces lit up when I spoke to them. My grandchildren, who had only heard stories of their parents' childhood toys, were fascinated by the children who now played with similar, simpler things with such unbridled joy. Leo, my pragmatic eldest, spent an afternoon helping fix a broken gate at the center. Ben, my quiet artist, drew caricatures that had the children squealing with laughter. Clara, my thoughtful daughter, sat with Fatima for a long time, listening, really listening, to the stories of Dar al-Amal. On Christmas Eve, we all shared a meal at the center. My children had brought donations, practical things like school supplies and warm clothes, but also balls, dolls, and art materials. They helped serve the food, played with the children, and for the first time in a long time, I saw them not as my children who had hurt me, but as adults capable of kindness and connection. Later that evening, back at the larger riad they had rented, as my grandchildren slept, Clara sat beside me. "Mom," she said softly, "thank you for showing us Dar al-Amal, and for making us see." I smiled. Sometimes, simplifying isn't about having less, Clara. It's about appreciating more what truly matters. My relationship with my children found a new footing after that. The old traditions of handmade cards and hoarded childhood toys didn't return in the same way, but something better emerged, a more honest understanding, a willingness to see beyond their own busy lives, and a shared experience in a place that had become my heart's true home. The warmest holiday I'd felt in years wasn't a one-time event. It was the beginning of a new chapter, where love and connection were no longer just memories packed away in an attic, but living, breathing realities, shared with all the children in my life, both near and far.